I never believed in strange things, until the night I stayed at my aunt's farmhouse. She lived on the outskirts of a small town far from streetlights and noise. I had visited her a few times before, but never stayed overnight. She had asked me to help her with some repairs, since my uncle was away for work. I was 19 at the time, and thought it would be an easy weekend. I took the last bus that Friday, and reached just as the sun dipped behind the trees. The farmhouse stood at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by fields and old fences. It looked peaceful, but the silence felt different. It was not the calm kind of quiet. It was the kind that pressed on your ears the moment I stepped off the bus. My aunt waved from the porch, smiling warmly. She was always kind, and I felt at home right away. We ate dinner and talked for a while. Then she showed me the guest room. It was upstairs with a view of the backyard and the small barn behind the house. She told me to keep the windows closed because sometimes the wind made the shutters bang. I said I would. The night air was cool and still. I could hear frogs croaking somewhere far off. I lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling, thinking about how quiet it was out there. No cars, no people, no sound except the soft ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I do not remember when I fell asleep, but I woke up sometime after. Midnight, to a sound that did not belong. It was faint but clear, a slow creak like a door opening. I sat up and listened. The sound came again, the creak, then silence. I thought maybe my aunt had gone to the kitchen for water, but when I stepped out into the hallway, the house was dark. The only light came from the moon through the window. At the far end, I called out softly. No answer. I started down the stairs. The wooden steps groaned under my feet when I reached the bottom. I noticed the front door was slightly open, just enough for the wind to move it. I closed it quietly and checked the lock. It was fine. I turned back to go upstairs when I heard a new sound. It came from the backyard, something soft brushing against the barn wall. I froze. The window beside the door looked out over the fields. I pulled the curtain just enough to peek outside. The moonlight lit the ground clearly. The barn door was open and moving slightly in the wind. I could see the old tools inside, and the empty space where my uncle kept his tractor. I thought maybe the wind had blown it open, so I grabbed the flashlight from the shelf and went outside. The grass was wet and cold under my feet. I walked slowly toward the barn. The light from the moon made everything silver. The door creaked louder as I approached when I reached it. I pushed it open wider and shone my flashlight inside. The beam caught dust floating in the air. The place smelled of hay and oil. Nothing looked out of place except one thing near the back wall. There was a shape covered with a tarp. It was big, maybe the size of a person kneeling. I thought it was just equipment, but something about it made me uneasy. I stepped closer and lifted a corner of the tarp. There was nothing under it except a few wooden boxes. I laughed quietly at myself for getting scared over nothing. I turned to leave, and that was when I saw it at the far end of the barn, just beyond the light of my flashlight. A figure was standing. It was tall and still. I could not see its face, but it was there watching me. My mouth went dry. I took a step back. The figure did not move. I blinked, and it was gone. The light hit only empty space. I ran out of the barn and back to the house, locking the door behind me. My aunt was still asleep upstairs. I did not want to wake her. So I sat in the kitchen trying to calm down. I told myself it was just a trick of the shadows. I stayed awake until dawn, staring at the window. Every time the wind moved the curtain, my heart jumped when the sun rose. Everything looked normal again. I helped my aunt make breakfast and did not mention what I saw. She seemed cheerful and busy. We worked around the house, fixing the fence and cleaning the shed by afternoon. I had almost convinced myself it was nothing. That night we had dinner early. My aunt went to bed around 10. I stayed up reading a book in the living room. The clock ticked softly, and the lamp cast a warm glow across the room. It felt peaceful again, until I heard something outside. The same slow creak as last night. The barn door. I tried to ignore it for a minute, but the sound came again, louder this time. I grabbed the flashlight and went to the back window. The barn stood in the dark, its door wide open. The wind barely moved, but the door swung back and forth. I thought about waking my aunt, but I did not want to scare her. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The night was colder than before. The flashlight flickered slightly as I walked toward the barn. The air smelled of wet earth. When I reached the door, I pushed it gently. It opened all the way and hit the wall with a dull thud. The inside was dark and silent. I shone the light around. Nothing looked wrong. I turned to leave, and then heard footsteps behind me, slow and soft. I spun around. The light caught dust again, but no one was there. The door stood still. I stepped backward toward the exit, my hands shaking. I could feel someone there even if I could not see them. The air around me felt thick. I walked out fast, locking the door behind me. When I reached the house, I found the back door slightly open again, though I had closed it minutes ago. My chest felt tight. I shut it and went straight upstairs. My aunt was still asleep. I checked the lock on my window and then sat on the bed staring at the moonlight on the floor. I stayed awake until morning the next day. I told my aunt that someone might be coming around the barn at night. Her smile faded. She said she had heard strange noises too. She thought it was an animal. But the footprints she found last week near the fence were too large. She said the dog from the nearby farm had gone missing a few nights earlier. That made me uneasy. She said it was probably a stray animal and told me not to worry. But that night I could not shake the feeling that we were not alone. I told her I would stay up to keep watch. She agreed and went to bed. I sat by the window, flashlight in hand, staring at the barn. The fields were quiet and still. Hours passed and nothing moved around 2 in the morning. I started feeling tired. I blinked a few times, fighting sleep. Then I saw it. The barn door opened slowly by itself. The wood creaked in the still air. My stomach dropped. I watched as a tall shadow stepped out into the open moonlight, hit it for a second, and I saw a human shape, but too dark, too wrong. It moved toward the house, not fast but steady. I could not move. I could only watch it come closer. The flashlight shook in my hands. I turned it on and aimed it through the window. The beam hit the figure, but it vanished like smoke. I ran to my aunt's room and woke her. She came out confused. I pointed toward the window, but the yard was empty. She told me to calm down, but I could tell she was scared too. She locked all the doors and windows, and we sat in the living room waiting for morning when the sun rose. Everything was still. She made tea, but her hands shook slightly. She said she had seen strange things before since my uncle left. She said sometimes she heard knocking on the walls or saw the barn door open when there was no wind. She thought maybe the place was old, or maybe the land had its secrets. After that night, I packed my things and left. I told her to stay with relatives for a few days. She promised she would, but later that week when I called her, she said she was fine and staying at the farmhouse as usual. She said everything had been quiet since then. Months passed and I tried to forget about it, but one night I got a call from my uncle. He said my aunt had gone missing. He came home from work and found the front door open and the light still on. Her phone was on the table, but she was gone. The police searched the property and the surrounding fields. They found nothing except the barn door open again. Even though the lock was still on it, they said it was like she had just walked out and disappeared. I did not know what to say. I still think about that place. Sometimes when I drive past the road that leads there, I see the faint outline of the farmhouse far in the distance. It looks quiet and empty. But at night when I close my eyes, I still see that figure stepping out of the barn and walking slowly toward the house, and I wonder if it ever really stopped.